Hello everyone, welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel, and Mirz Hashem today we will be learning Daf Samach Vav Amid Beis. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos. We pick up today on the very bottom line of Daf Samach Vav Amid Aleph Siman Reish Pei Ches Sif Tes. Our learning should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, Hanesunim Batzaru Ba'Shivya, Ha'imdim Bein Bayam Ubein Bayabasha, Hamakim Yerachem Aleihem, V'Yaitziem Yitzar L'Rvacha Me'afel L'Oira Mishibud L'Geula, Hashta B'Galo V'Zman Kariv and Amar Amen. Our learning should be a schus Refuah Shalema for Yitzchak Baruch ben Rachel Shalva, Meshemer ben Esther Fradl, Tzvi ben Leah Miriam, Daniel ben Naomi, and it should be a schus for Yisrael ben Rachel, Yonasan ben Michal, Yoel ben Michal. The Rebbe should watch over them, together with all of our other brothers and sisters who find themselves in harm's way. Bechol Makom Shehem. So we are continuing here to learn about fasting / davening, being tzayik, calling out to the Ribbono Shel Olam in tefillah on Shabbos, and we pick up with that theme now. Very bottom line, Samach Vav Amud Aleph Siman Reish Pei Ches Sif Tes, says the Mechaber. Ein tzayakim, we don't cry out to the Ribbono Shel Olam for our needs. V'loy masriin bay, we don't blow shofar. Remember that in times of tzara, one of the things that Klal Yisrael would do is blow shofar. We don't blow shofar, so ein tzayakim v'loy masriin bay. We're not tzayik, we don't call out to the Ribbono Shel Olam in tefillah, we don't blow shofar al shum tzara. For any type of tzara on Shabbos, we're not tzayik and we don't blow shofar. Now, blowing shofar is an issa d'Rabbanan. There's an issa d'Rabbanan, you're not allowed to blow a shofar on Shabbos. Chazal say blowing shofar chochma v'loy malacha. It's a chochma. You have to know how to blow shofar. I happen to be a Baal Tekeya. So it's a chochma. You have to know how to do it. But it's not a malacha. There's no isser malacha involved in blowing shofar. But, having said that, it is an issa d'Rabbanan to blow shofar. So you're not over the issa d'Rabbanan of blowing shofar on Shabbos over a tzara. Why can't you cry out to the Ribbono Shel Olam in tefillah on Shabbos? So the reason for ein tzayakim is very simple, and it's something that we've touched upon already many times before. And that is that if there's a tzara, and you're crying out to the Ribbono Shel Olam over the tzara on Shabbos, you are going to be mitztayer on Shabbos. If nebuch somebody is a chayla, somebody is ill, a loved one, and you're crying out to the Ribbono Shel Olam in tefillah that the Ribbono Shel Olam should give a refuah shalema for the loved one. So by thinking about the ill individual, by being mispalel for that ill individual, it's going to cause you to think about it. It's going to cause you to be mitztayer about it. And you're not allowed to be mitztayer on Shabbos. So that for that reason, says the Mechaber, ein tzayakim v'loy masriin by al shum tzara. However, there are exceptions. Says the Mechaber Chutz, with the exception of mitzaras hamizonos, when it comes to parnasa. You're allowed to cry out to the Ribbono Shel Olam if there's a tzara of parnasa. Now we have to understand what that means. Let's read a little bit further. Shetzarakim aleh bapeh, when it comes to a tzara of mizonos, you're allowed to cry out to the Ribbono Shel Olam verbally. You could be mispalel, you could say tehillim, v'loy b'shofar, but you're still not allowed to be over the issa d'Rabbanan of blowing shofar. Now, what does it mean, a tzaras mizonos? So the Baragola brings down over here a Gemara from Baba Basra, Daf Tzadik Aleph Amud Aleph. Those of you who are learning Daf Yomi, this is in recent history of Daf Yomi. So what does the Gemara say over there? The language of the Gemara over there is not tzaras mizonos, it's tzaras pragmatia. Pragmatia means business. For business problems, you're allowed to cry out to the Ribbono Shel Olam on Shabbos. What do business problems mean? So what it says over there is, if you have, let's say you have a city, and most of the parnasa of that city is based on a certain commodity. So we can imagine, let's say in an agrarian society, maybe you have an area where they're all wheat growers, or they're all cotton growers, or they're all soybean growers. Or maybe you have another town where it's full of blacksmiths and they deal with metals. If there's an area where most of the parnas of the city is based on a particular commodity, and the market crashes in that commodity. So you have a coal town, and now the United States government decides to go green, and they decide no more coal, and now the value of coal plummets, and now nobody has parnasa because their parnasa, it's all totally on coal, and now they can't sell coal anymore. That's a tsaras pragmatia. That is a tzara for the tzibur, where the market has crashed, the economy has crashed. That's what it means over here, that when it comes to a tsaras mizonos, you're allowed to be tzayik to the Rabbeinu Shalom on Shabbos. So this does not mean that a single individual, Nebuch, is going through a hard time in Parnasa, so now he could go ahead and he could be mispal on Shabbos. It means that the tzibur has a tsaras pragmatia on Shabbos. There's been an economic crash. So now it's something that affects the tzibur. It's a tsaras mizonos. You can be mispal on Shabbos. Why? Because such a tsaras mizonos could mamish become pekuach nefesh. If there's a real economic crash, people pashut don't have money, people don't have food to put on the table, and the organizations don't have money to give out either because everything's collapsed, that could be pekuach nefesh. So for that reason, you're allowed to be mispalel even on Shabbos. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol niheh b'dvarim. Says the Mechaber weiter, V'chein, similarly, Ir shehi kifua anosin, if you have a city that Nebuch Leilenu was surrounded by attackers, by bandits, people who are going to come in and chas v'shalom, they're going to kill people. Ir shehi kifua anosin, a city was surrounded by bandits, oy nahar, or you have a city that's under threat of a river flooding the city. Usvina miturefes bayam, or you have a ship that's sinking at sea. Miturefes means it's being tossed. So you have a violent storm, and you have a ship that's under threat of being capsized by the storm. In those cases also, you're allowed to cry out on Shabbos, because these are pekuach nefesh. For pekuach nefesh, yamamish mechal Shabbos daraisa. So certainly you could be mispal to the Rabbeinu Shalom on Shabbos. Says the Mechaber weiter, Va'afilu al yochid hanirdaf, even a single individual who's being chased mipnei anosin, by bandits, oy listim, or robbers, oy ruach ra, or a ruach ra. Now the word ruach ra means an evil spirit. Exactly what does this ruach ra mean? Right now what I'm going to say is, it's mashma that this ruach ra is some kind of a supernatural element. This is, he was possessed by shadim, or whatever it is. So if you have an individual that's being chased by bandits, by robbers, or he's been possessed by some kind of ruach ra, these are all things that could put him into a sakonas pekuach nefesh. What the Mefarshim seem to say over here is that somebody who's possessed by a ruach ra, you never know what he might do. He might run into the yam and drown. He might jump off a roof. So I don't know if this is some kind of psychotic break, or it's a real supernatural type of thing. I don't know exactly what it is, but so says the Mechaber. And the Mechaber is going to qualify it a little bit in a few lines later. But in all of these cases, even the Yochid, not a Tzibur, he could be mispal to the Rabbeinu Shalom because he's in mortal danger. So certainly we're going to allow him to cry out to the Rabbeinu Shalom. Zayakin, he could cry out, umischanin in betfilos, and he could daven to Hashem with tefillah b'Shabbos, aval ein toikin. But you still can't be over the Yisad Rabbanon of blowing shofar. Ella in kain toikin lekabetz ha'am. There is a time that you're allowed to blow shofar, and that is if you need to blow shofar as an alarm signal to call people together. Let's say there's a threat that the river is going to flood its banks, and you want to call everybody together. You want to get everybody, evacuate everybody, or there are bandits coming, and you want to call people to come help and fight them off. Elim came toikin lekabetz ha'am lazar la'achem. If you're calling people together to help out, ulahatzilam, and to save people, then zichri, you're allowed to blow shofar and be over the Yisad Rabbanon of blowing shofar. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Chav Zayin, Mipnei Ruach Ra. Says the Mishnah Berurah, what does this mean, Ruach Ra? Shenichnas by Ruach Shade. He's being possessed by some kind of a shade, a demon. V'rotz v'hoilech, and therefore he's running back and forth. He's out of control. Shema Yit Babanar. Such a person is mamish under danger. He might drown. A Yipol, or he might fall down v'yamas and die. He might fall off a roof. Or it could be that Ruach Ra doesn't necessarily mean some kind of a supernatural thing. He has some kind of illness that's making him very, very sick. So then he too could cry out to the Rabbeinu Shalom. I'm sorry. This Mishnah Berurah is Chav Zayin actually goes on Sif Yud, so let's go into Sif Yud here in the Mechaber. I told you the Mechaber was going to qualify this Ruach Ra. Says the Mechaber, Sif Yud, Nirdaf b'pnei Ruach Ra she'amru. When I just told you about somebody who was a Nirdaf because of a Ruach Ra, lav dafka. It doesn't have to be a Ruach Ra. Now let's remember, we're talking about the Mechaber. This is the Mechaber of the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Kairoi talking over here. Rabbi Yosef Kairoi was a major Mekubal. Rabbi Yosef Kairoi understood these things. He understood the world of Shadim, etc., etc. That's why the Mechaber needs to tell you, when I just told you in Sif Tes, I was talking about a Ruach Ra, okay. Near the Ruach Ra she'amru, when I told you that somebody who's being chased by a Ruach Ra is allowed to go out and be zoyek to the Rabbeinu Shalom, lav davka. It doesn't have to be a Ruach Ra. Any chayla who's in mortal danger on that day, on Shabbos, everybody's allowed to call out in tefillah and to be misbal. So if you have somebody who's mamish a sakanas mavis, somebody who's mamish in sakanas pekuach nefesh on Shabbos, the olim could get together in the Bismedrash and they could say Tehillim for him on Shabbos. V'chein noagu loymar mitzalim b'Shabbos. We're noyig to say the tefillah of mitzalim. This tefillah is brought down. The Mishnah Berurah mentions where. I forgot. I think he mentions where. No, the Mishnah Berurah does not bring it down. This was a tefillah. We make a mishaberach for cholim by Kriyas HaTorah. They had a tefillah that started mitzalalinon ano. The word mitzalim or mitzalalinon, it's the same shirish as the Aramaic word tsalusa. Tsalusa means tefillah. So mitzalim means we are being mispalil. So they had a nusach tefillah. It's not the same as our mishaberach, but they had a nusach of a tefillah, a text for a tefillah that they would say when the chazan was holding the Sefer Torah after Kriyas HaTorah. They would say this tefillah of mitzalim, where they would say we're being mispalil for the following cholim. So the Mechaber is telling you over here, the minig is that we do say this tefillah of mitzalim when we have a chayla who is misukin hayoim, who is in danger today. It's pekuach nefesh on Shabbos. So we're zoyik, we're mispal for him by the Sefer Torah. We say this tefillah of mitzalim. Now the Mishnah Berurah says over here, we already did Mishnah Berurah is got to Chav Zayin, let's go to Chav Ches. Hamasukin by bayoim. We could be mispal for the chayla that is in sakana on Shabbos. Alva misha eina masukin. But if you have a chayla who's very ill, but he's not in sakanas pekuach nefesh on Shabbos, you're not worried chas v'chalila that he might pass on Shabbos, then loy. Then you can't say a tefillah like mitzalim on Shabbos because you can't be tzayik. You can't cry out for him on Shabbos. How do we make a mishaberach for the chaylim? Says the Mishnah Berurah, ukisha'oisin mishaberach l'chayla she'ein by sakana. When we make a mishaberach for chaylim on Shabbos and we put in the names of chaylim that are not a chayla sheyesh by sakana mamish, oimer Shabbos himelizoik u'refuah krevelavai. So then we say Shabbos himelizoik. It's Shabbos, and therefore we have to refrain from crying out. And the refuah krayvelavai, mitzvah Hashem, the refuah is going to come very quickly. So we're not being tzayik. We're mentioning the chayla, but we're saying very clearly Shabbos imelizik. Shabbos, we can't be tzayik. It is definitely mutter to make a mishaberach for a woman who's in labor, who's having a difficult time on Shabbos when she's in labor. A woman that's in labor is considered misukenes. So to a woman who has already given birth, a kippur during the first week, you shouldn't be machmer, and you could definitely make a mishaberach, and you don't have to say Shabbos imelizik or refuah krevelavai. For a woman who gave birth and it's within a week, she's still considered to be a misukenes. Okay, moving along. Oh no, we didn't finish the Ramah here. Says the Ramah, the last line here of Siman Reish Peches, Haga, v'chein mutar levarach ha'chayla hamasukin, you can make a mishaberach for a chayla hamasukin by b'yom. Siman Reish Peites. Seder Suda Shakar Shel Shabbos. How do we comport ourselves during the daytime Suda on Shabbos? Uboy Beis Seifim, and here we have 2 Seifim. Says the Mechaber Sif Aleph. When it's time for the Suda Shabbos morning. Yeh Shulchanai Aruch. Your table should be set. Umita Mutzas Yafeh. And your bed should be nicely made. We have to discuss that in the Mishnah Berurah, exactly what that means. We're talking Shabbos morning here. So Shabbos morning, the Mechaber says your table should be set, your bed should be nicely made, umapa perusa, and you have to have a mappa. Now this doesn't mean that you just have to have a tablecloth on the table. This means like what we learned about earlier when it comes to the Friday night Suda, about mappa perusa, which means that you have to have a challah cover. Now we said you have to have a tablecloth too, because the challah is supposed to be covered on bottom and on top. So you have to have a mappa prusa. You have to have something over the challah, and you have to have something under the challah. Kemoi besudas laila, just like the halacha is by the Friday night Suda. The Friday night Suda, you have all of these requirements. You have the same requirements by the Shabbos day Suda. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Eis Katan Aleph, umita mutzas. You have to have a made bed. Now this is a problem. Why is it a problem? Let's think about this for a minute. You made your bed Erev Shabbos. You ate the Friday night Suda. After the Friday night Suda, you went to sleep. Now you woke up Shabbos morning and your bed is no longer made because you slept in it. Now the Mechaber is telling you have to make your bed. Why are you making your bed? If you're making your bed for Motzei Shabbos, you're making your bed Shabbos morning so that Motzei Shabbos, when you want to go to sleep, you go to a nice, freshly turned out bed. Well, you wouldn't be allowed to do that on Shabbos because that would be hachana on Shabbos. You're making preparations on Shabbos for Motzei Shabbos. You're making your bed on Shabbos so that it should be nice and freshly made for when you go to sleep Motzei Shabbos. That's hachana. You're not allowed to do that. So what's the Mechaber telling me here? That for the Shabbos day Suda, your bed should be made. How are you allowed to make your bed? That's the problem that the Mechaber is going to deal with now. The Mishnah Berurah is going to deal with now. So says the Mishnah Berurah is cut now. Your bed should be made. Says the Mishnah Berurah, there are 3 different ways that you could understand this. First of all, Hainu me Erev Shabbos. Maybe we're talking about a bed that you didn't sleep in Friday night. And what the Mechaber is telling you is, you have beds in the house. So, I don't know, you have a guest bed. The guest bed should not be all sloppy on Shabbos. You should make even the guest bed. You should make it on Erev Shabbos. So then when you sit down for the Shabbos day meal, your mita is mutzas. It's made from Erev Shabbos. Nobody slept in it last night. That's one possibility. Says the Mishnah Berurah, another possibility. Oy kadeshi yishan ba b'Shabbos. Or maybe you're making your bed Shabbos morning when you get up, so that it should be nice and geschmack for your Shabbos afternoon nap after the Suda. So now it's not hachana for Motzei Shabbos, it's hachana for Shabbos afternoon. That's fine, you're allowed to do that. So then the Mechaber is telling you get up Shabbos morning, make your bed. And your bed should be made before the Suda, so that you have a nice geschmack bed to crawl into after the Suda to take a Shabbos afternoon nap. Or a third possibility, shehu b'cheder shedarsham. Maybe you have a bed in the dining room. And the truth is, I had this growing up. Growing up, my bed was actually in the dining room, and it had one of these daybed covers. But I would sleep Friday night. I would go to sleep Friday night after the Suda. I'm going to sleep in the dining room. If my bed would be left unmade Shabbos morning, then when we sat down to the Suda, right next to the dining room table, there would be a sloppy unmade bed. That's a bazayin. That's mamish a bazayin for the Suda Shabbos. So in that case, even if I'm not going to take a Shabbos afternoon nap, I'm making the bed Shabbos morning for Kavod Shabbos. I'm making the bed so that when we sit down to the Shabbos Suda, it should be Bakavadik. The room has to be Bakavadik, which means also, by the way, that you should realize that there's an Indian of Kavod Shabbos and Suda Shabbos, that when you sit down to your Suda Shabbos, your dining room should be neat. Not that your dining room should be tzavarfin and should be a mess. That's a bazayin. So says the Mishnah Berurah, Oishu b'cheder shedarsham. Maybe there's a bed that you're living in, meaning that's the room that you're going to eat the Suda in. In that case, it would be a bazayin if you don't make the bed. It would be a bazayin for Shabbos, a bazayin for the Suda Shabbos. But without any of these 3 possibilities, it would be also to make the bed Shabbos morning. If you're making a bed Shabbos morning only so that you should sleep in it Motzei Shabbos, that's Achana on Shabbos for Motzei Shabbos, that would be Asr. Omasha Kosavu Mapa Prusa, and when the Mechaber says that another requirement for the daytime Suda is you need a Mapa Prusa, Ayin Le'el B'Siman Reish Ayin Aleph Mishnah Berurah Sif Mem Aleph, he sends us back to Siman Reish Ayin Aleph, where we learned about the Mapa Prusa, that you have to have the Challah covered, the Challah dekel. You have to have the Challah covered on top and on bottom. This is maybe because of Zecher to the mun. The mun that we got had a layer of tal on the bottom and a layer of tal on top, or we need to cover the challah because of the bezoyan of the pas. Why are we making kiddush on the yayin? Why are we making the brach of bar pri hagafen on the yayin before we make hamaitzi on the lechem, when we usually give kedima to the lechem? So we have to cover up the challah to protect it from bezoyan. But this is the same mappa that we were talking about over there. When the Mechaber says over here that Shabbos by the day Suda, you need a mappa prusa, he's talking about the challah being covered. Okay, now we turn back to the Mechaber, the first line of Siman Reish Peites, near the end of the line. Says the Mechaber, all right, so you have a set table, your bed is made, you have a mappa prusa, now v'yivarech al hayayin bar pri hagafen, now you make kiddush. How do you make kiddush? What's the kiddush? Shabbos morning. Says the Mechaber, v'yivarech al hayayin bar pri hagafen. You take a cup of wine, and you make bar pri hagafen. That is the Iker Kiddush of Shabbos day. It's bar pri hagafen. V'hu nikra kiddusha rabbah. And we call this Kiddush kiddusha rabbah, the great Kiddush. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Eis Cotton Base. V'yavarech, you make a bracha bar pri hagafen and a koshel yayin. That's Kiddush. Says the Chavetz Chaim, yesh noegin liftayach mitchila pasuk v'shamru b'nei Yisrael. There are those that say the pasuk of Vishamru. What's the pasuk of Vishamru? So the pasuk of Vishamru is Vishamru b'nei Yisrael as HaShabbos, la'asais as HaShabbos l'dairoisam bris olam. That is the entirety of the pasuk of Vishamru. So the Vishamru that people say in Kiddush all the time, the Vishamru that we say in Ma'ariv between Hashkivenu and Shemona Esrei, actually is composed of two psukim. It's Shmois Lamed Aleph. It's Shmois Lamed Aleph, psukim Tezayin and Yud Zayin. The first pasuk is V'shamru b'nei Yisrael HaShabbos, la'asais HaShabbos l'dairoisam bris olam. That's the first pasuk. The second pasuk is that's the first pasuk. The second pasuk is Bein Yuvei b'nei Yisrael oisi la'olam ki sheishes yom amasa Hashem es hashamayim v'sa'aretz uvayoyim hashvi shavas v'yinafash. Let me just make sure. I don't like making mistakes of this nature. I feel silly that I'm actually questioning myself right now exactly where the pasuk ends, but I'm going to check inside. It's Shmois Lamed Aleph. Shmois Lamed Aleph. Tes Zayin. Yeah, I got it right. The first pasuk is V'shamru b'nei Yisrael Shabbos la'asais Shabbos l'dairoisam bris olam. That's pasuk number 1. Pasuk number 2, Beini Yuvei b'nei Yisrael oisi la'olam ki sheishes yom amasa Hashem es hashamayim v'sa'aretz v'vayoyim hashvi shavas v'yinafash. Now, I've heard people use those two psukim for Kiddush all the time. I use those two psukim for Kiddush also. I add on to it, but I use those two psukim for Kiddush as well. What's interesting is that in the language of the Mishnah Berurah, he only mentions the first pasuk. The language of the Mishnah Berurah is Yesh noegin liftayach b'tchila pasuk v'shamru b'nei Yisrael v'gomer. He doesn't mention both psukim. Interesting. Or some people say for Kiddush, Zachar es Yom HaShabbos lekadshoy ad v'yekadsheyu. Now there's a mistake in the print here in the Mishnah Berurah. These psukim, the first pasuk, the paragraph of the Aseret HaDibros that begins Zachar es Yom HaShabbos lekadshoy and ends v'yekadsheyu, that's Shmois Perek Ches. Shmois Perek Chaf. It's Shmois Perek Chaf. Psukim Ches through Yud Aleph. My Mishnah Berurah says Shmois Chaf Zayin. It's a mistake. It's Shmois Chaf Ches, and it's through pasuk Yud Aleph. That would be Zachar through Vayikadshehu. So some people say that for Kiddush. V'yesh mei hahamoin. Then there are some people, says the Chavetz Chaim, shepoischen mei al kein berach. Al kein berach is actually pasuk Yud Aleph, but it's not the entire pasuk. We take a look over here. So this is also Chaf. This is from the Aseres HaDibros. This is Shmois Chaf. Let me get there. Shmois Chaf. Pasuk Yud Aleph. Pasuk Yud Aleph starts Ki sheishes yamim asa Hashem es hashamayim ves haaretz es hayom vas kol asher bam vayonach bayom hashvi. That's the beginning of Pasuk Yud Aleph. The end of Pasuk Yud Aleph is Al Kain Berach Hashem es Yom HaShabbos vayikadisheyu. Now, I've heard a lot of people make Kiddush. What they do is they say the first two psukim of Vishamru. They say Vishamru b'nei Yisrael Shabbos Lasis Shabbos Dorais B'Salem Beini v'b'nei Yisrael Oisi Elohim Kishesh Yom HaSav Shabbos Hashemayim v'Zaretz V'vayom HaShvi Shabbos v'Yinafash Al Kain Berach Hashem es Yom HaShabbos v'Yikadisheyu. So when they say Al Kain Berach, they're saying half of Shmois Perek Chaf Pasuk Yud Aleph. They're saying the second half of the pasuk. Says the Chavetz Chaim, that is improper. Why is it improper? Because says the Mishnah Berurah, V'shaloi kadinhu. This is improper. The chol psuka doloi paske Moshe, any pasuk that was not divided by Moshe Rabbeinu, anan loy paskinon. We don't divide. In other words, the psukim are divided up the way we have them. That's halacha l'Moshe b'Sinai. We don't divide psukim differently than they were divided by Moshe Rabbeinu. So we can't say half of a pasuk as part of Kiddush, Al Kain Berach. So you got to say the whole pasuk. So for instance, me, I make Kiddush Shabbos morning, I follow the minhag of my father, Olav Shalom. But my father, Olav Shalom, said Vishamru and Al Kain Berach. I don't do that because of this halacha. So instead I say Vishamru and Kisheshes. I say the entire pasuk Yud Aleph, not half of the pasuk Yud Aleph. Okay, Ois Cotton Gimel. The Mechaber said that this Kiddush, which the Mechaber said the Ikar of Kiddush, is simply Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Bar Piagofen. You don't need Vishamru, you don't need Zachar, you don't need Kisheshes, you don't need Imtashuv. All you need is Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Bar Piagofen. This Kiddush, says the Mechaber, is called Kiddusha Rabbah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Kiddusha Rabbah. The Nikra B'Lashon Zeh, it's called Kiddusha Rabbah, the great Kiddush, Shehu K'moshe Kairin Sagi Nahar. In the language of the Gemara, we call a blind person a Sagi Nahar. What do the words Sagi Nahar mean? It means he has a lot of light. He's full of vision. It's being sarcastic. We're calling the blind person, who can't see at all, he has no light, we're calling him a Sagi Nahar. He has plenty of light. We do that to avoid using a negative term and calling him a blind individual. So too over here, we're calling it a Kiddusha Rabbah, the great Kiddush. Yeah, Friday night Kiddush has two brachas. It's got a whole nusach over here. The Shabbos day Kiddush is just Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Bar Piagofen. We call it Kiddusha Rabbah. Mipnei shezeh Kiddush ain't a klal daraisa. Also, this Kiddush is not a chiyuv daraisa at all. Friday night is a daraisa. Shabbos morning is not a daraisa. It's derabanan. Rak shetiknu l'chvayit Shabbos. The Chazal were masakin the Kiddush Shabbos day, a special kibbutz Shabbos. They were masakin the Kiddush Shabbos day. Vasbechu akra. And they based it on a pasuk. What did they base it on? The pasuk says, Zachar es Yom HaShabbos l'kadshoy. We use the word es to be a ribui. We say that the word es is coming to include something. The word es, strictly speaking, is an extra word. So we use it as a ribui. And we say es, Zachar Yom HaShabbos l'kadshoy. That tells us the chiyuv daraisa of Kiddush Friday night. The extra word es is coming to include that we should also have a Kiddush Shabbos by day. But it's not a real drasha. It's only what we call an asmachta. It's a din d'Rabbanan. They leaned it, so to speak. They've had a basis for it in a pasuk, but it's a d'Rabbanan, not a d'Oraisa. Ked'isa b'Gemara b'Psachim. Ois cotton dalid. No, we didn't do that yet. Let's go back into the Mechaber. Second line into Siman Reish Peites, the middle of the line. So we made Kiddush. V'achakach yitol yadav. After we make Kiddush, then we go wash the Tilas Yadayim, and then we make Hamoitzi. Says the Ramah, V'ayin le'el siman reish ayin aleph sif yud beis b'Hagah, but take a look at what I told you in the Hagah in siman reish ayin aleph. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Daled, V'ayin le'el siman reish ayin aleph sif yud beis. Hainu, what the Ramah is reminding us over here is, the sham mevur b'Hagah, over there in reish ayin aleph, we had a Ramah that told us, the noitlim liyadayim, Koidim Kiddush. We had a machlokes the Mechaber and the Ramah. The Mechaber holds that first you make Kiddush, then you wash the Tilas Yadayim and you make Hamoitzi. The Ramah was chaylik. The Ramah said no. First you wash the Tilas Yadayim, then you make Kiddush, then you make Hamoitzi. What's behind this machlokes? The Mechaber holds you're not allowed to be mafsik between the Tilas Yadayim and Hamoitzi. Tekif l'netila bracha. Right after the Tilas Yadayim, you have to make Hamoitzi. So you can't be mafsik with Kiddush. Therefore, the Mechaber says, first make Kiddush, then the Tilas Yadayim, then Hamoitzi. The Ramah disagrees. The Ramah says, Kiddush is not a hefsik. Kiddush is a tzarchei suda. Kiddush is a requirement of the Shabbos Suda. Therefore, it's not considered a hefsik between the Tilas Yadayim and Hamoitzi. So better go wash the Tilas Yadayim, then make Kiddush, then make Hamoitzi. No problem. We paskin, most of us, paskin like the Mechaber. And we say that we want to be choishish for the concern that Kiddush might present a hefsik between the Tilas Yadayim and the Hamoitzi. Therefore, we, generally speaking, first make Kiddush, then wash the Tilas Yadayim and Hamoitzi. Vayin sham b'Mishnah Berurah the kamachren kasu sham the tav yaser linay kedas hamechaber. Okay, going weiter in the mechaber, third line into Reish Pei Tes, says the mechaber. All right, so you've set your table, you've made your bed, you have made kiddush alayayin, you drank the wine. Now you washed the Tilas Yadayim. Now v'yivtza alecha Mishnah. Now you make hamoitzi on lecha Mishnah on two chalos. Kamoy balayla, just like Friday night. V'yisoid, and now you sit down and you eat yisuda. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan, hey v'yisoid, you should eat yisuda. Kasev reikach siman nun daled. The reikach writes in siman nun daled. Acher she'achlu kol tzarchan. Very interesting lashon. After you eat kol tzarchan, all that you need to eat. And if you look in the Rekach actually adds, including your chamin, including your hot dish, so including your cholent. So you ate your challah, you had your chopped liver and egg salad, you had your gala, and you also had your cholent. You ate everything. Yesh bezamrim zmiros v'shavach la'kadosh baruch hu. There are those that sing zmiros. Very interesting. So the Rekach says, first you eat, kol tzarchan, everything. Then after you eat, go sing zmiros. Doesn't explain why. I think the reason for the Rekach might be, let's get our priorities straight. The Suda is the Iker Einik Shabbos. So first you got to take care of the Daraisa. The Daraisa is Einik Shabbos. Sit down and eat a Geshmak Suda. Now you wanna fabrenk sich over the Suda. You wanna sit down and you wanna have a kunzitz. You wanna sing zmiris. Go ahead, Gvaldik. It's beautiful. It's Geshmak. It's everything else. But first comes the Suda. The Suda is the Iker Einik Shabbos. It's the Daraisa. And have your whole Einik Shabbos. Don't just eat a little bit and play around at the edges. That seems to be what this Rekach is saying. I don't think that that's the minig far and wide, but maybe the reason that's not the minig is because, dare I say, that Baruch Hashem, in the prosperity that most of Klal Yisrael enjoys nowadays, our Suda is not a 4-course Suda. Our Suda is probably what they would call 4 Sudas. We have so much food that Pashut, after you eat the first course of the Shabbos Day Suda, you're probably so full already that you probably don't even need to eat anything anymore. So eat the first course and then sing Zmiris. Now you sang some Zmiris, you have a little bit more of an appetite, eat some more, then sing some more Zmiris, and then you can have dessert. But if you didn't have a Geshmak Suda yet, you aren't Mekayim Einik Shabbos yet. So why are you taking a break to sing Zmiris? That's the way I'm understanding it. Continues the Mishnah Berurah and he says, V'toiv lilmay Torah b'miktzas koydem achila. Very interesting. He brings down from the Eliyah Rabbah, before you sit down to the Suda, learn Epis. Should have Epis some limud HaTorah first. Interesting. Okay, weiter in the Mechaber. So again, the third line down in Siman Reish Pei Tes Sif Aleph says the Mechaber, V'gam zeh kiddush tzarich sheyeh b'makom Suda. Remember all the complicated halachas that we learned about the Friday night kiddush, that you need kiddush b'makom Suda. So too Shabbos by day. You also need Kiddush b'makom Suda. All of those halachas click in by the Shabbos day Suda. You have to have Kiddush b'makom Suda. So when you make Kiddush, in order to be Yoitze Kiddush, you need to make Kiddush, and you have to have the minimums of a Suda. So either you need to drink a Revi'as Yayin, or if you're the one making Kiddush, preferably you should have 2 Revi'as in of Yayin, one for Kiddush and one for the Suda. You need to have at least a Kazayas of cake. So in order to be Yoitze, Kiddush b'makom Suda. But the Chiv of Kiddush b'makom Suda kicks in Shabbos by day too. Also, don't make Kiddush in one place and eat someplace else. It should all be together. Okay. Continues the Mechaber, right by the Ois Cotton Vav for the Mishnah Berurah, 4 lines down into Siman Reish Peites. V'shelo yitayim koydem loy klum kamay b'kiddush halayla. Just like we learned that you're not allowed to eat anything Friday night before you make Kiddush, you're not allowed to eat anything Shabbos day before you make Kiddush. You have a chiyuv of Kiddush, you're not allowed to eat anything. You're not allowed to be toyim anything. You're not allowed to taste anything, says the Mechaber, before you make Kiddush. Umiu, however, says the Mechaber, lishtais mayim ba'boker kaidem tefillah, to drink a little water before davening in the morning, mutter, that's mutter when it comes to the question of Kiddush. Mimnei shadayin le'chalal of chavis Kiddush. Because when you wake up in the morning and you didn't daven yet, you don't have a chiyuv of Kiddush yet. Why not? Why don't you have a chiyuv of Kiddush? Very easy. Why you don't have a chiyuv of Kiddush? The reason you have no chiyuv of Kiddush is because the chiyuv of Kiddush is Kiddush b'makom Suda. Kiddush is inextricably connected to Suda. Now, are you allowed to eat your Suda before davening? No, you're not allowed to eat Suda before you daven chakras. So, the before you daven chakras cannot possibly be a Zman of the Suda. If it's not a Zman of the Suda, it's not a Zman of Kiddush. So there's no Chiv Kiddush yet. So says the Mechaber, you want to take a drink of water before davening Shabbos morning, there's no problem of Kiddush. Now there's a different problem. And that is eating and drinking before davening. But drinking water before davening is not a shayla. You're not allowed to drink water before you daven chakras. So says the Mechaber, over here in Hilchos Shabbos, in the context of the halachas of Kiddush, Shabbos by day, there's no problem drinking a little water before chakras, because there's no chiyuv of Kiddush yet. Hagah says the Ramav Ayin Le'el Kol Dina Kiddush Siman Reish Ayin Aleph and Siman Reish Ayin Beis and Siman Reish Ayin Gimel. He sends us back to those 3 very beautiful, very complex and fascinating Simanim, where we learned all of these halachas of Kiddush b'makom Suda, etc., etc. All of these halachas apply to the daytime Suda as well. Says the Mishnah Berurah Cotton Zayin Loi Chalolav. No, gotta back up. You're not allowed to taste anything before the Kiddush Shabbos morning. Women have to know that they also have this din, that they're not allowed to eat before Kiddush or drink before Kiddush. Because in all of Hilchos Shabbos, men and women, the halachas apply equally to both of them. The chiyuv of Kiddush is not chal before davening. The Kiddush ain't shaykh elu b'zman Suda, because like I said, Kiddush and Suda are inextricably connected. So if it's not a zman of Suda, it can't be a zman of Kiddush. And as far as eating and drinking before davening, that's not a problem over here, because the Mechaber is being matu you to drink a little water. Drinking a little water before davening is a chavuter, like we learned earlier in Siman Peites. I would have liked to go a little bit weiter, but I'm not going to be able to. I'm going to have to stop over here, and we'll continue next time, Yirtz Hashem, with Sif Beis. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The source of limud HaTorah should be megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua's, Refuas, Parnasa, and Shidduchim to all those in need. We should be zeicher to see the BS called Tzedek. B'mehera v'yameinu, amen. Be well.